Someone has been randomly knocking on my door at 3:58 a.m. exactly. My usual sleep schedule keeps me up until around midnight most of the time. Being the closing manager for a retailer keeps me from my humble home until closer to 10 most nights anyway, so I'm usually right in the middle of my sleep when it happens. The intrusive disturbances started about a week ago now. The knocking isn't an aggressive banging, but instead fast, consistent thuds. They're just loud enough to hear throughout my little one-bedroom apartment. It honestly sounds like someone intentionally trying to be as annoying as possible without coming across as violent. Knock, 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 knock. The sound of the rapid thumping dragged me awake from my dead sleep that first night. The fast-paced rhythmic knocking kept going until I went to the front door. Knock, 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 knock. The moment I was within reach of the door, the knocking abruptly stopped. The suddenness of me waking up had me beyond disoriented as I looked down to check my phone and saw the time. Thinking it was a prank, I turned to walk away. Knock, knock, knock. The knocking burst back to life with the movement of my foot and stopped with my stare returning to the door. My breathing sped up alongside my heart rate as I felt myself break out in a sweat. I stood there for a moment, petrified at the idea that the person on the other side of the door somehow knew I was walking away. Knock, knock, knock. A slow rhythm of knocks resumed, just as hard as the previous ones, but slow to a pace of about every 2 seconds. With a deep inhale, I calmed myself and leaned forward. On the other side of my peephole, I saw the well-lit hallway of my apartment and someone standing facing away from the door. Looking at them from behind, I could tell they were a shorter person with a ratty, knotted mess of thick black hair that strung over a stained white shirt. They were almost completely still aside from the subtle rise and fall of their shoulders as they drew rapid breaths. As I watched them through the tiny window, I knew one thing for certain. I was not opening the door under any circumstances. My voice quivered as I called out to them through the door. "What do you want?" "Do you know what time it is?" With no response, I pulled my face away and again turned to walk. Knock, knock, knock. I whipped back to the door as soon as the knocking drummed back up. With my hand touching the door, it halted just as abruptly as it started. I peeked through the door to confirm that the person was still there. Turning around, I limply slumped down against the door, sitting with my arms folded over my knees. How could they know when I was trying to walk away?
I awoke curled up on the floor in front of my door. My heart rate spiked as I stood and frantically peered through the peephole. Letting out a massive exhale, I saw the gray floors and cream-colored walls, but no mess of black hair. I thought to myself, if that was somebody pranking me, they did a good job, as I stretched my back and made my way to the bathroom. It took me checking the hall 4 more times before I felt comfortable leaving that morning. My hands shook as I tried to lock the door and drop my keys. I knelt down to retrieve them, seeing several long strands of black hair beneath my feet, along with dark stains in the shape of someone's bare feet in the carpet. Shaking off the shiver that ran up my spine, I locked the door and rushed through the hall to the elevator. I struggled with the most basic of tasks that day at work. I was rereading every other line 3 or 4 times to piece my reports together. My stomach did a flip as I returned home that evening, seeing my door again and noticing tiny scuffs in the center of it. The paint looked to be worn in that one spot in particular, as though it had been rubbed off. I didn't bother to eat dinner that night and felt my chest tighten when it was time to get ready for bed. I tossed and turned until around 2 in the morning when I was finally able to force myself to sleep. Knock, 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 knock. Waking immediately, I was overcome with a sense of dread and scrambled to grab my phone. Sure enough, my screen read 3:58 a.m., just like the night before. I got out of bed and walked the same sleepy path as though guided by a string. Knock, knock, knock. Again, the knocking stopped the moment I was within arm's reach, and again the small figure stood with their matted tangle of black hair facing me. I stayed at the door for nearly an hour. The entire time I tried to collect my scattered thoughts to know what to do. Should I call the cops? What are the odds they even believe me and show? Maybe if I open the door? No, I'm not doing that. I can't just sleep here again, though. Finally, I stood up and walked back to my bedroom. Knock, 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 knock. The knocks rang throughout my apartment as I lay down, pulled my phone out, and put my headphones in. Either I was crazy and hallucinating, or the prankster would get tired and leave. Either way, I was going to play my music and sleep through it. The faint sound of yelling breached my sleep as a particularly quiet transition between songs carried out. Blinking heavily, I pulled one of my headphones out to hear the voice more clearly. Unmistakably, it was my neighbor Clyde yelling something that I couldn't make out. I stumbled out of bed and ran to the door.
Clyde's door across the hall was wide open, with his body covering most of it from my view. He was standing halfway between his apartment and the person still perched in front of mine. I was just barely able to make out what he was saying. His voice was raspy with sleep as he waved his arms around excitedly. "And at this fucking hour? How the hell did a bum even get in here, damn it? Are you fucking listening to me still?" His tan, round face was bright red as his long, dirty blonde hair bounced with each exaggerated movement. He'd clearly been woken up by the knocking, as he was in his boxers wearing a snug-fitting white tank top, one that probably fit better 10 pounds ago. Just as I reached for the door handle to intervene, Clyde stopped yelling. Suddenly, the figure in front of my door reached out, took Clyde's hand, and walked him back into his own apartment. By the time I got my door open and burst into the hall, Clyde's door was closed and locked. I wrenched at the door handle as I knocked hard on his door. After a moment, I heard his voice call out from the other side of the door in a low tone. "Please go away. It's late and I don't want any visitors." Rushing back to my own apartment, I called the cops. I stood at my door and stared through the pee-hole for the entire 3 hours it took them to respond. The sun was cresting through my windows behind me as I saw the glint of the police officer's badge. He turned away from me as I heard a knock on Clyde's door. Several moments later, a smiling Clyde opened the door, his skin paler than normal. His lips pulled as far back as they could, stretching his smile to an almost inhuman degree. He looked up at the officer as they traded only a few sentences. Clyde then pointed at my apartment. The officer nodded before turning to face my home. A hard boom shook my door as I opened it to see the officer scowl at me from under his low haircut. "Sir, are you the one who called us?" I nodded before opening my mouth to respond, but the officer cut my words off before I could speak them. "Is there any reason why your neighbor says you were knocking on his door for several hours last night?" His words cut through my brain like a hot knife. Is that what Clyde had just told him? I cleared my throat as I answered, "No, sir. Someone was knocking at my door and, well, my neighbor, Clyde, you spoke to him just now. He came out and yelled at them, but he says you were the one knocking and who he was yelling at. Even said he threatened to call the cops if you didn't leave him alone." Standing there with my mouth open, my tongue felt like sandpaper against the roof of my mouth. My entire mouth went bone dry as I searched for the words to reply. The officer squinted as he looked to the left and right as he continued.
"If I asked these other residents about if there was someone else out here, or if it was just you knocking and yelling, what are they gonna tell me?" Bewildered, I raised both of my hands with the palms facing up in a plea to be believed. "Look, I don't know what's going on between the two of you. You don't seem doped up to me, but this whole thing is a bit ridiculous. What do you say you leave your neighbor alone and leave last night in the past?" The officer raised an eyebrow at me as he finished speaking. Exhaling a heavy breath, I nodded as the officer turned and walked back down the hall. Once he reached the elevator, I noticed him glance back at me while scratching his head. A ding rang through the hall, prompting him to enter the elevator as he shook his head slightly. I turned back to my own apartment and grabbed the door handle. Knock, knock. My heart started pounding like a drum in my chest as I looked behind me. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Clyde's door was ever so slightly cracked open before snapping shut. The next day was a non-stop game of spot the difference as I monitored Clyde's apartment. There weren't any signs of him coming or going throughout the entire day. I even tried to ask the other neighbors if they had seen anything, but nobody on my floor would answer their doors. I knock and call out, but not a single person would answer me. As I worked my way up and down the hall, I noticed scuffs in the paint at the center of every door between my own and the elevator. All of the scuffs were in the exact same spot on the doors, but stopped at Clyde's. Sleep kept itself far from my grasp that night. My eyes burned and grew heavy as I made sure to watch the clock tick away. Counting the minutes as they passed, I anticipated the knock-in to infect my apartment again. My mind raced when I watched the time change over from 3:57 a.m. to 3:58 a.m. As the minute passed, I played the past 2 nights back in my head. Fighting hard, I tried to convince myself they were real as the clock changed to 3:59 a.m. I remained awake through the sunrise, unable to accept the lack of activity that night. Maybe I had hallucinated the whole situation. Stress wasn't weighing on me with work, and I've never been a family person, though. Was I genuinely going insane? I would have to be if those events really didn't happen, if I was creating my own torture. That new stress carried on throughout the day as I couldn't collect my thoughts well enough to be useful on the job. The turmoil I had twisted myself into left me with no option but to call out of work. I sat there all day again, unable to find the constitution to leave the apartment. Something in my mind told me that if I left, it would be behind every door. Again, I struggled to fall asleep that night, but was out cold once I managed to get into bed to finally succumb to my exhaustion. Knock, 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 knock.
The echoing sounds drummed me awake yet again as the rhythmic thuds filled my apartment. Checking my phone, I yet again saw 3:58 a.m. Stumbling out of bed, I landed on my knees and in a panic crawled forward to the door. The knocking stopped, as it usually did when I got close. As I stood up, I pressed my face to the peephole, but kept my eyes closed tight. Taking deep breaths, I worked to calm myself as I opened my eyes slowly. Clyde's round face smiled up at me from the hallway. I nearly fell backwards at the unexpected sight, but managed to focus on the door behind him. Clyde's door was still closed, the same as it had been every time I checked throughout the past couple days. Oddly, he was looking up into the peephole of my door. Clyde and I were nearly the exact same height, and I had to hunt slightly to see through the hole. He wasn't crouching, but stood upright, staring up like a child to an adult. That same smile from the conversation with the officer was stretched across his face. I shifted my head to try and see the rest of his body. He was standing so close to the door, though, that I couldn't see anything below his stained white shirt. His eyes were incredibly bloodshot and filled with tears that refused to fall. At that angle, I could see cracks in his face. The edges of the smile were pulling themselves apart. Glints of blood shined in the hallway light as I felt his gaze pierce through my door and sink into me. I took in the widening smile when I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. The tiny peephole nearly hid it from me at that moment, but I caught it. Clyde's door was slowly opening behind him. It stopped once it was only a few inches open and remained there. Again, I didn't sleep that night and refused to walk away from the door. Remaining curled up on the floor, I only took breaks to check on that thing that couldn't have been Clyde. Each time I returned to the peephole in my door, I could have sworn its head shifted to follow my movement. Calling the cops was out of the question, and I was too terrified to scream out for any of the neighbors. The thought of Clyde's fate befalling any of them at my expense kept that idea at bay. That was 2 days ago now. The thing that stole Clyde's face was gone when I checked sometime around 7 in the morning. Even though it left me, Clyde's door across the hall is still open. It never closed and has just stayed cracked by those few inches. I've stayed in this 15-foot area that spans my kitchen, across my front door, and to my bathroom. I managed to get some sleep last night when 3:59 a.m. finally came around, but I don't know how much longer I can stay awake now.
My kitchen was already low on groceries, and I'm not leaving here until Clyde's door closes. Since I've taken up post here, I haven't heard anyone else walk up or down the hall. I don't know if that thing has already gotten everyone else and it's just me left. All I do know is that I really don't want to die here, but I will not let that thing get me, even if it means starving to death.
I'm so fucked up right now. I heard the skittering for the entirety of my first night in my new apartment. I could barely sleep. I thought it was an insect at first, maybe some sort of rodent stuck in the claustrophobic aluminum duct.
God, I remember thinking, I hope it's not a rat. I wish it had been a rat. All night I hurried, back and forth, right over my head. It was so quiet that I almost didn't notice it at first. As soon as my ears picked up the faint tick, tick, ticking, I couldn't get it out of my head. It was maddening. The next day, I listened closely, and sure enough, I could track all of its tiny movements. The scampering would go from the leftmost vent in my room, run along the wall bordering the ceiling, and end right at the top of my closet doorframe before doing it all over again. With heavy, sagging eyelids, I watched the white-painted vent, waiting for anything. It had clearly been given the landlord's special, haphazardly glossed over just in time for me to move in. I don't know what I was expecting. Tiny insect legs, maybe a delicate little mouse claw. Alas, despite my mounting frustration, I saw nothing. I heard only the back and forth Cupid shuffle of invisible, erratic feet.
Tick, tick, tick. Tick, tick, tick.
Rather than unfurling and enjoying the first day in my new home, I sat, irritated, and shifted my gaze along the top of my wall, following the audible miscreant with my eyes incessantly. It really was maddening.
Tick, tick, tick.
Tick, tick, tick. It got to the point that I was hyper-focused on it, even in other rooms. I simply couldn't focus on anything else, no matter how hard I tried. I even took a walk, but I swear I could still hear it, almost like an itch deep in my head, behind my eyes.
Tick, 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 tick.
I laid for hours my second night, trying to fall asleep, eyes shut tighter than a freshly sewn button. But I just couldn't escape it. The constant noise, back and forth, from the vent opening to the door frame of the closet, then all over again. I couldn't take it anymore. At 2 a.m., I bolted straight up in the dark with a sigh. Bug, rat, didn't matter what manner of critter it was. I was determined to get it. I found a screwdriver in my kitchen drawer. I fought with the vent opening in the dark. It wasn't even screwed in properly, just painted over like everything else. Within seconds, the plastic cover came off with a pop. Only then did the scattering come to a confused halt. It was maybe a foot from the mouth of the cave. That only pissed me off more. Oh, so now you want to stop, huh? That's it? Get over here, I hissed, standing on my tiptoes and reaching into the hole. It scrambled back. I grit my teeth, reaching in further. It retreats deeper. The vent system itself was surprisingly clean. Smooth metal surfaces thumping and twanging as I bumbled further and further in.
Tick, 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 tick.
It stayed just out of my reach, yet just close enough that I could feel my fingertips brush against its sweaty skin. I felt it slipping further and further into the wall, and I only had so much arm that I could twist to fit into the vent. My mission could not be clearer in that moment. I needed to grab it quickly. My last chance at peaceful sleep was literally skittering away from my fingers. "Oh, no, you don't," I wheezed triumphantly, shoving my forearm all the way to my elbow in a last-ditch burst of energy to snag the thing. Now, I want to pause to acknowledge something. I know it was a stupid decision, all of this. Why didn't I try to shine a light in or put down pest bait? Admittedly, it was a compulsive thought to shove my arm into a vent, spurred by desperation and a lack of proper sleep. Illogical. I was instantly sobered by a horrific sensation. My fingers were wrapped around something cold with a soft exterior, clammy, icy to the touch, but distinctly wrong. Too firm, not like a small animal. I had gripped something that felt like It tried to fight, but I fumbled until I had wrestled more of it into my grasp. I felt more of the thing. Creases, bends, multiple long, cold, phallic objects, each no more than a few inches long. They varied in length and fought my grasp vigorously. It was when I found the distinctly hard shell that adorned one of their otherwise soft tips that I realized what I was holding in my hand. It was 5 fingers. With growing panic, I tried to write off my own discovery. But sure enough, when I kept feeling further and further, I found knuckles, then the back of a hand with the hard ridges of bones underneath the skin, then a soft palm in the center of the wriggling mass. I was holding an adult human hand, and it was in my vent, embedded in my wall. Almost instinctively, I yanked my hand back, the object still clutched in between my digits. Now, this next part is really hard to explain, so I have to make sure I do it right. If it's confusing, I'm sorry. You don't think of holding a hand as anything other than holding a hand. The physics of the act isn't something you consider. You just sort of do it. You either intertwine your fingers between the fingers of another, or maybe you just hold their palm and they hold yours, which is admittedly less intimate, more of a hug than an embrace. I used to get to hold someone's hand. Anyhow, the way I was gripping this hand, I knew it was disembodied, because the way I had to hold it kind of made it ball up into a clenched fist. Imagine my fingers are tightly wrapped around the top of the wrist, so to speak. The whole hand is in my hand, and where the top of the wrist would connect to an arm, it's just a nub, like it had grown entirely separate from the body it was assigned to. Maybe it was never assigned to a body at all. I don't know. What I do know is that the top of the nub had an opening, a cavity, and that cavity apparently had teeth. I realized that when I felt a sharp pain zap through the webbing between my thumb and my index finger, like a taut wire being cut. It fucking hurt. Bright crimson blood adorned on the edge of the vent hole, where I'd popped the plastic lid off only a moment early. I let go out of surprise at the sudden pain in my thumb, and the disembodied knuckle sandwich flew out into the recesses of my dark room, between some boxes or something, into the shadows where I couldn't see it anymore. I had a brief notion that I'd need to look out for it, a notion that was quickly remedied when it came crawling out of the void like a crustacean and made a beeline directly back into the open hole. It doesn't have any discernible eyes. I doubt it has a brain. How did it know how to do that? Aside from what it did to my hand, that's that part that troubles me. I don't know, that thought fucked me up. Anyhow, it was quiet for a while. I called management, but they laughed at me and implied that they called the cops pretty quickly on prank callers. Very low tolerance. They also didn't appreciate being called earlier than 5 a.m. I guess my next step is to grab a maintenance guy or maybe a wandering neighbor in the morning. Convince them that I'm not crazy, just long enough to get them in here and make them see for themselves. Maybe I'll make a complaint about an unrelated issue and go from there. See what that does. Hell of an introduction, by the way. Something about first impressions? I left the opening off. If it comes out, it comes out. I doubt that it's going to do that, though. After it was still long enough, it went back to, well, what it's been doing since I got here. Back and forth, like it don't ever run out of steam.
Tick, 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 tick.
The sun's about to come up, and I haven't slept even a wink. I just keep staring at that opening with the driblets of scarlet around the corner. My hand hurts real bad. I haven't even put a Band-Aid on it. It just keeps bleeding. I wish it had just been a rat. 6 shadows move along the shoreline like phantoms, clad in neoprene, faces hidden behind rubber masks and eared lenses. They move as one, disciplined, deliberate, ghosts in black. But even beneath their hardened shells, each one carries their own fire, fear or fury.
Lieutenant Jack Harrow, the leader, square jaw, gravel voice. Harrow survived the Guadalcanal in Midway. He is a natural leader, cold as steel, silent in judgment. Sergeant Mason, Mad Dog Doyle, second in command. He has the eyes of a man who's been to hell and fucking loved it. He laughs too loudly. He kills too fast. His hands never stop twitching, always aching for the next fight.
Corporal Elias Kane, a preacher's son with a proud father until he became a killer. He carries his father's weather-worn Bible in his breast pocket. He whispers a verse with every kill. Private Robert Bobby Ray Knox is the wild card of the lot. Southerner. Don't care about getting out alive. Just the height of the sport. Maybe the only one on par with Mad Dog. Private Danny Kid Wheeler. The rookie. The new guy. Fresh from boot camp. Rosy-cheeked and still believes a medal has meaning. Chief Petty Officer Hank Pops Dugan is the elder of the lot. A veteran. Old enough to be Kid's father, but still young enough to kill without hesitation. Harrow raises a fist, and the group stop dead in their tracks. Turns. Good work, man. Training mission complete at 0300 hours. A light beckons from the ocean, and they all see it blinking. Right on time, utters Harrow. Final leg of training, the swim back. As the group arrive back at their transport, a converted cargo ship, a fellow seaman leans over the port side railing. The colonel want to see you men, on the double. In the deepest bowels of the altered vessel, Colonel Smith, in a rumpled old uniform, stands out front, mid-briefing. At 0200 this morning, we intercepted a coded Nazi transmission from Castle Schwarzblatt. The transmission leads us to believe there is a secret Nazi base underneath the castle, built on top of a sea cave system. Mad Dog speaks up. And we just so happen to be in the area? How convenient. Colonel Smith looks sharply at Harrow. War is never convenient, son. It's 1946. I should be at home watching my grandson play his first game of baseball. Instead, I'm here trying to make sure he has a world to grow up in.
Harrow nods silently as Kane says his piece. God willing, he will. The entire unit looks at Kane in contempt. God? There's no God on the front lines. Anyway, the colonel abruptly says, regardless of how convenient it is or isn't, we are here, and our job as frogmen is to use the ocean to our advantage. The unit of frogmen skims across the ocean surface in a dinghy. Already in their wetsuits, the men load their assault rifles, pack grenades and C4, and sheath their knives. Kid has a nervous look on his face. Don't worry, kid. I'll look after you, says Pops. Mad Dog stares and laughs. What a duo, both at either end of the age spectrum. Bobby chimes in, and both in diapers. The unit laughs. Kid and Pop scoff. The frogmen arrive at the cliff's edge and the Gothic castle high above. Harrow addresses the team. Once we're in, silence unless necessary. The mission is simple. Infiltrate, destroy, and get the fuck out. The team nods and readies their handheld propulsion units. Mad Dog looks at Kid. Remember, kid, the SS aren't like regular Krauts. They are the most brutal soldiers at the Nazi regime's disposal. They'll bore you just to see if your fat floats. Kid nods. Don't worry about me. My sweetheart back home just gave birth. I've got every reason to make it out alive. To meet my baby son, Jerry. The unit overhears. They all congratulate him and shake his hand. It's a nice moment. All right, enough of the chit-chat. We got killing to do. Under the ocean, a wake of bubbles trails the propulsion devices as the frogmen make their way toward a large opening at the base of the cliff, the entrance to the cave system. As they make their way through the natural inlet into the belly of the Nazi beast, Kane looks nervous and make a sign of the cross on his chest. Harrow, the natural leader he is, goes last, ensuring his team enters safely. The frogmen slip through the underwater cave system like eels, following the cave system. There's only one pathway. It seems man-made. Maybe a pirate smuggler route a few hundred years back. Maybe a secret escape for the castle's former occupants. Either way, Mad Dog was right. It is convenient. Up ahead, light shines through a steel grate. Harrow approaches, lifts the grate, and slips his head through, checking out the area. A basement, dimly lit, but enough to see the room, is empty. Harrow lifts his pack through the hole and jumps into the room. The place was filled with wet stone walls, moisture and hissing pipes. Creaks echoed and mold sifted through the air. He is quickly joined by the rest of his team as Harrow has his rifle locked and loaded, aimed at the only door. As quickly as the rest of the team enters, they unzip their packs and get into position with their rifles and explosives.
Harrow leads the team through the underbelly of the castle. They move through the maze of stone hallways with ease and as silently as mice. It's like something out of Wolfenstein, but this is real. War is no game.
The frogmen come to a door that is locked from the inside. Without words, Kane approaches and picks the lock with a small cross-shaped tool. These men are professionals. They know their roles. Mad Dog looks at the crucifix lockpick and shakes his head. With the door unlocked, the team slipped through. The room is dark. As they search the room with their torches, twisted shadows spread across the walls. The frogmen work as a team to ensure there are no immediate threats. And satisfied,
Pop switches on the lights. Kid almost immediately vomits. They are in some kind of laboratory. There are dissected animals all over the benches. Tanks filled with mutilated human bodies. Twisted limbs. Brains. It's horrifying. Some kind of experimentation happened here.
Harrow looks at his team, breaks his own ordered silence. This isn't just a Nazi base. This is the SS, the occult men. Take a good look. This is why we fight. Hitler's insane followers think they can breach our mortal realm and reach into the spirit world and take all the power for themselves. But it's just not true. We are men, not gods.
Kane nods in agreement. Bobby, however, scoffs. "Fuck that," he silently exclaims. "We're frogmen." The group share a quiet laugh, while Mad Dog nods in agreement. Pops adds, "The SS are no joke, soldiers. Don't get caught sleeping."
All right, back to silence. Harrow orders, and the men oblige. They move on stealthily through the only other door in the room.
As the frogmen silently scuttle down another hallway, they come to a row of doors. Harrow opens one and squeezes his head through. He turns back to his team and makes a signal. The frogmen unsheath their blades and enter. It's an SS dorm room. The frogmen enter and take up their positions behind one sleeping SS soldier each and slit their throats. Blood pours as they keep their hands over their prey's mouths, watching them silently pass into the spirit world they so desperately seek.
They move on to the next row and repeat the process. They come to the final row and slit another 5 throats. Kid, however, is lined up at an empty bed. Then it comes. Crack! 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 A flurry of gunfire comes from the doorway as an SS soldier in his underpants tries to exact revenge. "Die, fucking!" he yells as he sprays bullets. The frogmen take cover behind the bunk beds, the SS soldier's bullets hitting his own men as he fires aimlessly. The frogmen return fire and the SS soldier takes cover. Kane makes a signal to Harrow, who nods. Kane slips onto the ground and makes his way under the beds to the wall by the doorway. Harrow signals for the frogmen to hold their fire. They do. As the SS soldier steps back into the doorway to fire, Kane shoves his knife through the Kraut's eye. He drops dead. The frogmen come out from their cover and they make their way into the hallway. As they do, another SS soldier peeks out from the next dorm room and fires. Then another. The entire SS squad from the next room has readied itself for a fight. Back and forth the bullets fly until Pops throws a flashbang. Everyone takes cover, a rare moment of silence until the flashbang explodes. As the SS recover from the bright outburst of light, Bobby and Mad Dog pull their grenades and throw them into the doorroom. The grenades go off, leaving a flurry of blood, guts, limbs, and brains all over the walls. The frogmen make their way into the dorm room to search for survivors and finish them off. But there's no need. The entire SS squad has been decimated. The frogmen continue up the hallway and come to another section of the castle. They pass through the door to find a prison cell. A man in a lab coat is locked in it, covering his ears, clearly not used to loud gunfire and even louder explosions. The panicked man looks upon the frogmen and sees the American flag on their arm patch. He smiles with relief, then breaks down in tears.
Oh mio Dio, grazie, grazie, per favore, fine della mia sofferenza, uccidimi ora. Sono diventato la morte, un profanatore, the man says, over and over in a foreign language.
Harrow puts a finger to his lip, and the prisoner goes quiet.
Pops leans down to the man and whispers in Swiss, "Cosa hai fatto?"
The old man replies, "Qualcosa da cui non potrei mai essere reddito. Uccidimi, ti prego."
The prisoner starts to bang his head against the bars until his skull cracks and his near-jelly brain spills out, much to the astonishment of the frogmen. The prisoner's body spills onto the floor. Confused, Harrow looks at Pops. "What the hell did you say to him?" Pops, equally as confused, replies, "He wanted us to kill him for something he did. I asked him what. He said something he can never be redeemed from." The frogmen all look at each other, their inner fire, fury, or fear slayed across their faces. Harrow commands the frogmen, "We move on. Keep a keen eye out. We don't know what else to expect." The men move on, Kid remarking to Pops, "I didn't know you knew Swiss." Pops calmly replies, "There's a lot you don't know, kid." Harrow shooshes them both, and they oblige as they move on. Down the next hallway, there's another set of dorm rooms. The frogmen check their gear, ready for anything. They come to the door of the first one, which has a lock on it. The frogmen look at each other confused as Kane steps forward, kneels, and goes to work on the lock with his crucifix pick. He successfully unlocks the door, and the frogmen carefully filter into the room, taking up their positions. But aside from 3 sets of made bunk beds, the room is empty. The frogmen take a quick breather, filter back out of the room, and continue down the hallway and check the other dorm room. This one unlocked and completely empty, not even bunk beds. Harrow speaks. "Seems we've cleared out the enemy. Time to split into 2 and set our explosives. Put the C4 where we planned and meet back in 30. The frogmen nod and go about their business. In the dorm room they broke into, the dim lights fall over the made bunk beds. But if you look closely, there's a particular crease on the quilts in the shape of an unseen man. A low guttural sound can be heard as the invisible shapes glisten in the light and slowly start to appear. 6 human-like figures on a bed, each contracted muscles, hairless. They have webbed hands and feet, tongues like rope, black eyes, no eyelids, slimy skin, and wider than normal mouths. They look like frogs, but mean. Frogmen. What's more frightening is the SS tattoos on their arms, under the sludge dripping from their smooth gray skin. These frogmen look at each other and grin. The hunt is on. In the shallower rungs of the castle, Harrow and Kane plant their explosives. Harrow watches as Kane carves a crucifix into one of the blocks of C4, remarks, "How can you smoke one of the enemy one moment and be a man of God the next?" Kane considers, "It's not about God, Lieutenant. It's about ritual. It's about respect. It's about honor." Harrow nods, and the pair move on. In another dark corner of the creepy castle, Mad Dog and Bobby plant their C4. They're more jovial about it. "Too bad we already killed everyone. Would have loved to squash some live krauts under some castle rubble," says Mad Dog. Bobby laughs. "Kraut pancake. Sounds like a lovely breakfast." They share a laugh. Elsewhere, in another gothic passageway, Pops and Kid plant their explosives. Kid trembles as he handles his. It needs a charge to detonate, Kid, advises Pops. Kid nods. I know. My first time planting explosives is all. I'm shitting bricks either way. The could-be father-son duo move on. The bowels of the old castle creak and groan. Mad Dog and Bobby meet Harrow and Kane at a shadowy intersection. As they stealthily continue down the stone corridor, they come to another doorway. They hear a creak. They stop, guns at the ready. From around the corner, a mirror slides out, and the four frogmen are reflected in the reflection. Pop's voice breaks the silence. Friendlies, hold your fire. He and Kid join the rest, and the team is together again. As they pass through more corridors, they get closer to home. The old, refurbished cargo ship, made to look like a harmless freighter, but secretly containing special units of soldiers, like the 6 Frogmen. The 6 soldiers sneak around a corner, led by Harrow, who sees something ahead. He swiftly raises his fist, his frogmen quickly stopping in their tracks, trigger fingers itchy. Harrow stares down the empty corridor, suspicious of something. Mad Dog leans in. What is it, Lieutenant? To which Harrow replies, something up ahead. The 6 killers stare ahead, and sure enough, something glistens in the dim corridor lights. Suddenly, the figures of 6 horrifying creatures slowly become visible. Their gray skin and obvious mutations shocked all. Demons, remarks Kane. Kid gasps as Bobby argues. They're not demons, Kane. This is the work of the occult. With Mad Dog chiming in. Who give a fuck? Kill 'em! Kill 'em all! Harrow confirms. Open fire. The frogmen pull their triggers. Metal rains as bullets sling toward their opponents. Before any of the mutants are hit, though, they bend their knees, position themselves like frogs, then jump. Several spin and reach the ceiling, their hands and feet sticking to the roof, while the others attach to the wall. The 6 soldiers, eyes wide with awe, keep firing. However, one of the frogmen ejects his long tongue and lassos it around Harrow's neck. "Lieutenant!" cries Bobby. The Harrow drops his gun and pulls his knife. Before he can slice the tongue clean off, though, the frogman flings Harrow into the wall, his head crushing, his brains visible. He dies instantly. "Pull back!" cries Mad Dog, now in charge. The frogmen start to shuffle back in unison, still firing as the frogmen leap and jump all over the corridor, avoiding every bullet. As Pops and Kane stop to reload, one frogman leaps forward, meeting Kane face to face. Kane finishes reloading, but before he can fire, the mutated toad hits his gun and snaps it in half. Kane moves for hand-to-hand combat and punches the mutant in the face. As his fist recoils, he notices slime from the frogman's face on his hand. It quickly starts to rot away his skin. The other soldiers watch on, horrified, as Kane starts to scream at the pain of his flesh rotting. The amphibious toxin makes its way up Kane's arm as flesh, muscle, and blood fall away. "Kane, no!" yells Bobby, as Kane uses his remaining arm to pull a grenade. He pulls the pin with his mouth. "Take cover," yells Pops, as he, Kid, Mad Dog, and Bobby retreat.
Kane, looking the monster in his black eyes, smiles at the frogman. "I'd see you in hell, but you're the only one heading that way." Kane drops the grenade. The frogman leaps back and joins his own group as the grenade explodes, seeing the remainder of Kane's body get torn to shreds and the roof of the corridor collapses. In a moment of silence, the 4 remaining frogmen regroup. "What the fuck was that?" asks Kid. "Don't worry about it," answers Mad Dog. "Our mission is to kill whatever comes our way." The group nods. "Now let's find another way out of here, or we'll be dropping this castle down on top of us," Mad Dog states and moves on, followed by the rest. The group come to a kitchen, silent, strategic, but hurried. They take a moment to take a breath. As Bobby sucks down some water, he hears a low-pitched grunt. He looks up at the ceiling to see a frogman hanging from the ceiling. "Oh shit," he exclaims, going for his weapon, but the frogman opens his wide mouth and snaps his jaws shut over Bobby's head, decapitating him in a second. Blood squirts out as the rest of the team go for cover behind a table, then fire up at the ceiling at nothing. The frogman has disappeared. "Fuck me," yells Mad Dog as he spies a doorway. "Over here." He, Pops, and Kid go for it. Mad Dog opens it. Pops shoves Kid through, and Pops follows. As Mad Dog backs his way into the doorway, an elongated tongue pulls him back through into the kitchen, and his gun goes flying. Pops turns back, but Mad Dog gets out a muffled cry. "Complete the mission." Pops nods and ushers Kid down their escape route. Back in the kitchen, Mad Dog slices the tongue off the frogman, who cries out in pain. Mad Dog lifts the knife. "Come get it, Slimeball." The frogman refocuses and jumps at Mad Dog, kicking him into the oven bench, completely mangling his body. Still running, Pops and Kid come to an emergency map on the wall. They see a pathway out. "This way," says Pops. They move on, fast. "I think we lost him," states Kid, as he and Pops finally come to the grate. Pops hands Kid his detonator. "You first, hurry." Kid takes it, throws his gun through the grate, and jumps into the water. He surfaces up through the grate and looks at Pops, who's placing a claymore at the only door into the room. "Come on, stop fucking around." Pops replies, "Just a second." Kid's about to reply when he sees the 6 mutants turn off their camouflage. He gulps, then utters, "Pops, behind you." Pops stops his frantic planting of the claymore and stands. He slowly turns as the frogman climb down from the walls, 3 facing Kid and 3 facing Pops. Pops looks at Kid. "Complete the mission." Kid stares back as Pops lifts the claymore and sets it off. The frogmen all jump to find safety as Kid dives. He swims down and picks up his propulsion device as the explosion rocks the surface. Rocks fall around Kid as he turns his device on and powers on, a trail of bubbles behind him. As he leaves the castle behind, Kid checks his 6 to see a dark shadow behind him. A frogman made it through the grate and is in pursuit. Kid's propulsion device is fast, but the frogman glides through the water like it's nothing. The device just isn't quick enough, Kid thinks, as the frogman gets closer. He takes his knife and jams it in a crevice in the device and stops, turns, and faces the enemy. The frogman keeps on coming. Kid kicks off toward the mutated creature. They're going right for each other. Crash, they collide. Kid's knife smashing right through the frogman's skull. It's dead. Kid sucks in some deep breaths through his rebreather, then unjams the knife and takes off. He breaks the surface, still in the cover of night, to find their dinghy still in place. Treading water, he turns to face the castle, a shadow in the moonlight. He lifts the detonator and triggers it. The explosion is massive, the side of the cliff spraying for hundreds of meters, the entire castle falling from the edge of the cliff into the water. Kid offers a solemn smile. "Mission complete, Lieutenant," he whispers. As Kid turns back to the dinghy, he hears several splashes right behind him. He knows exactly what it is. The 5 remaining mutants have surfaced behind him. Kid sighs, knowing he'll never meet his baby. He slowly turns back around as he treads to face 5 demons. Black eyes, gray skin, wagging tongues, wide jaws. "Do it, you bastards," he invites. However, the frogmen silently fade away from visibility, leaving Kid alive. Confused, Kid gets on the dinghy and returns to the ship. As he's helped aboard, the colonel is there to meet him. "Are you the only one?" he asks. Kid nods. "What did you find in there?" the colonel inquires. Kid stares directly back into the colonel's eyes and mutters, "Hell, sir. It was hell." The colonel turns to follow Kid. "Briefing at 0800, Kid. We need to know what you saw and why you're the only survivor." Kid turns to reply, "They let me." Kid is quickly distracted as he notices 5 wet humanoid shapes glistening in the moonlight, water dripping. His eyes widen. No need for the briefing, Colonel. Looks like hell followed me home. The end.